Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Jester Politics Bourbon and Brandy Hour live here on X Spaces. You can also find us on YouTube now and on our website, jesterpolitics.com. You can find these spaces there. Tonight, we're going to address if Europe has rejected civil liberties. Before we begin, a note of gratitude. Jester Politics remains independent, sustained solely by your generous support. For now, we're going to kick off a merchandising campaign probably in June. I don't know what day in June because they haven't told me yet. Allow me to introduce your host. Leading us is Miss Deb, a distinguished expert whose career as senior executive spans technology, finance and other multiple sectors. With decades of leadership, she has navigated complex challenges with exceptional insight, offering a perspective honed by experience and precision. Her contributions tonight will illuminate the stakes of this debate with unmatched clarity. Next, we have Taz. He's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and Navy, where he mastered the high-stakes operations, including helicopter landings on little tiny boats. Then he transitioned to a legal career and became an attorney. He's the most intellectual person I know on the Constitution. And I'm Dr. Sean, your host, an Air Force veteran who went to the University of Alabama. Now I run a math team. All right. So, Taz, has Europe rejected civil liberties? Yes or no?
Yeah, en masse. But before I get to that, I just want to say real quick, India is hitting Pakistan pretty hard right now.
I saw that.
It's bad that you have two nuclear powers facing off, but I think that India had to do what they're doing. Anyway, civil liberties. Yeah. I want to define what civil liberties are before we get into it, because I don't think people, it's a word or a phrase we use a lot, but I'm not sure we really understand what it is. Our understanding in the U.S. of civil liberties come from the work of Hobbes and Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau. I know I butchered their names, but bear with me, Voltaire. They all did a lot of work on natural rights, and from that flowed our understanding of what we call our civil liberties or our constitutional rights. And if you look at the Bill of Rights, you have two types of liberties in there. You have natural liberties, which the First Amendment and Second Amendment would be natural liberties. Let me back up just a minute. A natural liberty flows from all the philosophers, the Enlightenment philosophers who worked in this area, went back to a time when there was no government. And they said, what rights did you have by virtue of being born? Speech, obviously, the right to keep your property, the right to bear arms, although I'm not sure they really address that too much. And that's where the First and Second Amendment flows from. Other parts of the Bill of Rights, such as the Sixth Amendment, right to jury trial, the Fifth Amendment, prohibition on excessive punishment or cruel and unusual punishment, are all rights given by the government. They're not natural rights. So the Bill of Rights is a mixture of God-given, well, they wouldn't use the word God because a lot of the founders were deists, but natural rights from the Creator. You have those by virtue of being born. It's all you need. The rest of them are given to you by the government. And the way the government gives you some of these rights, and going back to the enlightened philosophers, is that you didn't want to live in a state of nature for very long, because even though you had all these rights, the ones who were the strongest enforced them at their will. So if I was stronger than the person next to me, I could take his food. Or if I didn't like something he said, I could kill him. So we entered into governments or societies, and there comes the social contract, which also flows from the Enlightenment philosophers. And that basically says we agree to give up certain of our natural rights in order to have a society where we don't have to worry about people like myself coming around and stealing your brandy or bourbon or whatever. That's what we have. And what I find very strange is all the work on natural rights, natural liberties, came from French and British philosophers. And the French and the British are the ones that ignored them and rejected them. Instead, they went, I don't know, they adopted a hodgepodge of rights that are granted by the state instead of by you being born with them. And they codified this in the European Convention on Human Rights of 1953 is when it was adopted. And if you read that, it's a very, very expansive document, and it guarantees all kinds of rights. Like Article 10 guarantees you freedom of expression. And I'll just quote a little bit of this. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority, regardless of frontiers. freedoms. Pretty expansive stuff. But then the very next paragraph starts off with the exercise of these freedoms, since it carries with it duties and responsibilities, may be subject to formalities, conditions, restrictions, or penalties as are prescribed by law and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, territorial integrity, public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crimes, and here's the real kickers, for the protection of health or morals, and for the protection of the reputation of rights of others. That paragraph, there's more to it. I mean, it goes on for a little bit longer. That paragraph basically just stated that everything in paragraph 1, your freedom of speech, is subject to the whims of the government. They started off with this after World War II, and they wanted to make sure Nazism never again came back into being. And who can blame them? I mean, that's got to be one of the worst times in modern history. It was absolutely horrific. So they banned Nazi paraphernalia. They banned the Nazi salute. They banned speech praising the Nazis type things. But then they started going off. Let me back up. And the reason they said this is that the reason for World War II, according to the people that were pushing this, is because there was too much speech which allowed the Nazi party to come to power. Now, there's hundreds of books and thousands of articles written on what caused World War II and what caused the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party. Freedom of speech is not at the top of the list. In fact, the Weimar Republic had laws against a lot of speech, including anti-Semitism, and yet Hitler came to power flouting anti-Semitic ideals. The problem, I think, was not that there was too much speech, but because there was widespread depression in Germany as a result of the Versailles Treaty. That's my opinion. Now, people will argue that, but that's where I come at. The governments also kept on books laws that prohibited people from criticizing government authorities, nationalism, etc. And from 1953 until the early 2000s, the Europeans, even though they never had the expansive views on the freedom of speech as we do, they did protect it pretty much. But now they've gone overboard, and they're starting to expand suppression of speech from just keeping the Nazis from power, which never really worked anyway. Germany has always had a rather large neo-Nazi party, but they've expanded that to any speech that the powers to be disagree with. It's downright scary. Just recently, 60 Minutes had their, and they thought it was great, where they followed around the German police as they went busting into people's houses at 6 a.m, arresting them for posting memes on Facebook and X. They thought that was just great. It keeps getting worse. I mean, some of the cases that have gone on in the last 10 years, let me just give you a few. A 16-year-old girl in Germany, she reposted a pro-AfD, which is a right-wing party in Germany that mainstream parties dislike immensely, but which is now, it depends on who you read, is now the most popular party or the second most popular party. So both the left and right have been trying to suppress this party. This 16-year-old girl posted a pro-AfD video on TikTok involving, of all things, the Smurfs, because the AfD's color is blue and the Smurfs are blue, I guess. She got a visit from the cops in school and was threatened with arrest because she was spreading hate. A woman in the UK was silently, and this happened a couple times, silently praying in her head outside an abortion clinic, and she was arrested. Not that she was sitting there preaching, not that she was sitting there vocalizing a prayer. She was just standing within 200 meters, I think it's 200 meters, of the abortion clinic, which is a safe zone, and praying in her head. There was a guy that was arrested doing the same thing. In Scotland, they have a law that if you live within 200 meters of an abortion clinic and you're inside your house and you have a sign or you're wearing a T-shirt with an anti-abortion slogan on it, they can come and arrest you in your house if it can be seen from the street. And they say that that's not an infringement on free speech. The one I really liked was an Austrian woman. She's very much an anti-Islam. And she was given a speech in which she called Muhammad a pedophile for having sex, she claimed, with a 6-year-old, but according to their scriptures, it was 9 years old before he had sex with her. And she was arrested and tried and convicted. And she appealed that all the way up to the Supreme Court of Europe, and they confirmed the conviction. And they said, and this is a quote, that she had failed to neutrally inform her audience of the historical background, subjectively labeled, and she subjectively labeled Muhammad with a general sexual preference of a pedophile instead of making it clear that he also had relations with older women. So in other words, I guess because he was having sex with older women, it's okay to have sex with 9 years old. It makes no sense. But then they turned right around, and 4 years later in 2022, a person in Poland, a woman again, was convicted of all things assaulting the Holy Bible and was fined for blasphemous statements, insulting religious feelings. That was appealed up to the European Court of Human Rights, and they reversed it, saying that she could do that. So I guess it's okay to criticize Christianity, but not criticize Islam. And I'll get to why I think that's a huge problem in a minute. There was another woman in Germany who was fined 80,000 euros. Would I give a Nazi salute? No. If I saw somebody giving a Nazi salute, I would have some choice words for them. But I don't think the government should be getting involved in fining or jailing them. An AfD politician, again, the right-wing German party, was fined for claiming that migrants committed more rapes than German citizens. No one disputed his factual claim. Nobody said that was false. They just said it incited hatred, and that was enough for his conviction. In addition to these individual cases, well, let me give you one more. There was another German who posted anonymously an image insulting a German politician. I remember watching the news on this, and she was upset because he called her fat, among other things. He was arrested. They actually tracked down an anonymous poster and arrested him for calling a politician fat. Just recently, they've convicted Le Pen, who's the woman in charge of the right-wing French party, on I think it was embezzlement charges. And as a result, instead of just sending her to jail, they banned her from running for president. Now, I don't know, was she guilty? The court says she was, so I assume she was. But how does that prevent a person from being elected to office? Germany has just found that the AfD is an extremist organization, which allows them now to secretly spy on them and then go to court to have them banned. This is just, Hungary, the European court overturned the Hungarian election, not because it was fraudulent election, but because they didn't like person that was elected who happened to be of the right-wing party. Hungary's got its own problem, but I don't think that people should be overturning elections because you don't like the person who got elected. Going back to the, it's okay to criticize Christianity, but not okay to criticize Islam in the European High Court's mind anyway. The reason that's so I find scary is now you have blasphemy laws, and you can see them in Sweden. Two guys burned a Quran, and they were both charged. One of them was murdered by somebody. They haven't arrested him yet. The day after that guy was murdered, his partner was sentenced to prison for burning the Quran. There was a guy in the UK also burned a Quran, and he was attacked by a Muslim in the streets, broad daylight. They arrested both of them. It looks like the one that did the assault is going to get a little bit of jail time. The one that burned the Quran is going to get a lot. That may change, but that's the way things are stacking up in Europe. Shifting from free speech and religion for a minute and going to the right to bear arms, Europe has never been a big gun place, but they've never been so anti-self-protection as they have been in the last 15 years or so. It's gotten to the point in the UK where they're talking about, or they may have, I'm not sure, but I know they were talking about banning knives with points. In other words, they were going to have square-ended knives because they banned firearms and people just start stabbing each other. So now they banned knives over a certain length and people just kept stabbing each other. So now they're talking about banning knives with pointy ends. And this is real life stuff. And I tell people I'm not a nerd, but I guess I am in certain areas. And one of them is what I call the civil liberties areas. And there's a guy named John Stuart Mill. If you haven't heard of him, I would suggest you look him up. And if you get a chance, go on Amazon and get his book on liberty. He was a mid-19th century philosopher who wrote a lot on different things, but his seminal work is on liberty, which is about freedom of speech. And he has a quote that I just think is fantastic, and it's I'm going to quote this: "If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. And I think that's a hugely important concept to keep in mind. But Mills goes on, he points out that the things that people accept as the conventional wisdom have some truth to them usually. And the things people reject as being just silly nonsense also have some truth. And you get to the full truth when you have a clash of those two ideas. He says when those two ideas clash, that's when you get rid of all the false nonsense that each wraps around itself, and you get to what is really the truth of the matter, the whole truth. And I think that's a very important concept to keep in mind, and I think that's what Europe is missing out on. The other thing, and I tell this people all the time, if I had the magic wand and I could say for absolute certainty that your speech is absolutely incorrect and it's going to result in mass destruction, I could outlaw that speech. But nobody has that magic wand. Nobody does. So who do you want to give that power to? Who do you want to give the power to regulate your speech to? For those on the right, do you want to give it to Obama or Biden? Those on the left, do you want to give it to Trump and Marco Rubio? I mean, as much as I love my mother and I trusted her implicitly, I would not let her censor me. I'm certainly not going to let the government censor me. So yes, I think Europe is backsliding on civil liberties. And I spent a lot of time on free speech because I think free speech is the bedrock civil liberty that allows for all the other civil liberties. You can't have a free press without free speech. You can't have freedom of religion without free speech. You can't have the right to protest without free speech. You can't have the right to petition the government for redress without free speech. You can't have impartial courts without free speech. You can't have anything without free speech. So once you start backsliding on free speech, then all the other civil liberties are going to fall. In Europe, as infuriating as it is, they always like to lecture America, and they'll tell you, well, we have a culture that goes back 1,000 years. And yeah, they do. And for the vast majority of that, they were monarchies, which, as far as I can see, a monarchy is nothing more than a hereditary dictatorship. And when they start lecturing me on the need to censor speech and make sure that false speech or misinformation or disinformation or harmful speech or hateful speech is taken out, I want to remind them, just since the turn of this century, they've had Franco in Spain, Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, Stalin in the USSR, Ceausescu in Romania, Tito in Yugoslavia, Milosevic in Yugoslavia, and King Leopold II of Belgium, who wiped out half the population of Congo, Free State of Congo, due to his misrule, executions, illness, and malnutrition. So I don't want them to lecturing me on how their culture somehow gives them insight into what should and should not be allowed to be spoken of. I just don't want to hear it. Additionally, every time these people tell me this, I keep thinking that, I don't think, if you ask them why they censor speech, they'll first deny censoring it, but then they'll say there's restrictions on it, and those restrictions are needed for the greater good. And that sounds a whole hell of a lot like Stalin and Mao and Kim Jong-un and Castro and Batista and Pinochet and all these other dictators that always justified their authoritarian dictatorial rule for the greater good. And when I remind them of this, they all get in a big huff and go storming off. Is free speech perfect? No. Do I wish people would be more temperate in their language? Yes. But yes, freedom of speech is messy, but it's absolutely necessary. And anytime people start talking about regulating speech to get rid of misinformation and disinformation, ask yourself, who's going to be the regulator? And if it's anyone but God, you got a problem. Europe has that problem right now. They're already arresting people who criticize Islam. They're arresting people who criticize the government. They're arresting people for calling the politician fat. My God, if they arrested me for calling politicians names, I'd be in jail for the rest of my life. At best, they are authoritarian regimes disguised in the clothing of a democracy. Anyway, Sean, Doc, you got anything?
There is one thing. I'm very, very nice to politicians, so I would never, ever get arrested. Hey, if you guys want to talk, go ahead and hit your request,
Okay.
and we will get you approved. I think Taz needs to drop out and come back in.
Yes, I thought it amused me, but then I had to consider the source. When Prince Harry came over here, he was talking about was against the First Amendment. He could not believe we have freedom of speech here. And I'm like, well, he's an idiot. But yeah, I think Europe has been, if they can arrest you for a meme, what's next? That's what I was concerned about. What's next?
Right. Taz was talking about the First Amendment. There's also something that goes with the First Amendment that a lot of people don't understand. You're not forced to listen to other people. You can leave and not listen to them.
Right.
People
It's
don't understand
like
that.
change the channel.
Right. Exactly. So, Miss Nancy, did you want to go now or do you want to wait for Taz to come back?
No, I'll wait a second.
Okay. Yeah, you
I
can
mean,
block people and mute them and not listen to their nonsense instead of just, it's hate speech. Well, if you don't listen to it, then it isn't.
Well, it's pretty frightening to think that you can be praying in your head, minding your own business. You're not bothering anyone, but they can arrest you and put you in jail for thought.
It's insane.
For what you think, you can go to prison. And it's not, and I think there was like a little old lady that they put in prison, and it wasn't for like a couple days because you're a naughty old lady. It was a fairly decent time. And I could not believe it. And she was in a wheelchair and she said something that somebody didn't like. And so she had to go to prison. So,
It's
I mean,
insane.
where does it end? It doesn't. That's the problem. It doesn't end.
Yeah. When I say violence happens when people have empty bellies, this is part of what I mean. You have empty brains, empty minds. You have everybody else thinking for you as part of the empty belly description I use.
I agree, Sean. It's
well,
just, it's like, how in 1984 can we be?
Right.
And I mean the book, not the specific year.
Not the totally rad.
Yeah, to the max.
Well, I don't know if Taz is coming back or not, so
yeah, I don't know if
I sent him
Taz
a
is coming
DM
back.
and
Can you
everything
guys
else.
hear
So
me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know if Taz is coming back, but I just thought it's too bad that he couldn't hear us because in my opinion, this is like one of the best spaces that we've had in a long time, probably just because it's pretty much my favorite topic anyway. But I just thinking that, one thing I always say, and I don't know if I've even read it anywhere, it's just something that I've figured out
well, I
myself. Or
guess Taz is not coming back. Oh, for crying out loud. Now I can't hear anybody.
what I was going to say is that this is, probably just common sense, but it's just something that I've said. I've never really studied it, but I just innately believe in free speech so much. And here comes Taz back.
Yeah, I had to reboot my computer. It said the spaces weren't available.
Sean really?
Sorry about
Dude,
that.
Sean has gone silent too, and I just think it's really curious. I know Spaces have been having a problem lately that in a discussion about freedom of speech and civil liberties that we've had two people so far almost be axed off of the space, Taz and Jester.
Well, we can do a conspiracy theory next space.
Taz, you may want to know, although you couldn't hear any of us, we heard your whole thing.
Yeah, and we thought I mean it was, for me, it's my favorite topic. Superb space. Europe is worse. After hearing your summary, Europe is worse than I thought, and I already knew it was bad. And, what I was telling Deb and Sean and everybody in the space is that this is one of my favorite topics. Not that I've researched it inordinately because it's not my field of expertise, but it just is something that innately I believe in. And I believe, maybe going back to what you said at the first about natural rights, I think maybe natural rights are just the rights inside of us that we just know are true. We know that we should be able to speak and that everybody's speech is important. I mean, if these rights are deemed to us from our Creator, it seems like we would know about these rights. And another thing is, secondly,
let me jump in for a minute.
Okay.
Natural rights is actually a pretty well defined doctrine that came out of late 1600s, early 1700s, and you can see it in the Declaration of Independence. In fact, is pretty much a succinct restatement of John Locke.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bill of Rights is a restatement of Locke, Rousseau, and Montesquieu.
Yes,
and Voltaire. Natural rights are rights that you have by virtue of being born. Europe has taken a different thing, and they've gone to human rights and pretty much rejected the natural rights. And they include things like health care. Well, health care is not a natural right. Nice if the government wants to give it to you, but that's something that falls under the social contract. What do you give up on your natural rights in order to achieve in your society? Is the social contract. And maybe the Europeans want to give up some of their natural rights to have health care. But that's not a natural right. That's a government given right.
But
Call it what you want. It's a government given right.
I mean, and who would want that is what I'm saying. I maybe was trying to say that free speech, I mean, I don't know, is an instinctive right. Even a baby, if he's hungry, he will cry. That's his manner of speech at the moment. But what I was saying
naturally get mouthy. So yeah.
We seem to feel, no matter how young we are, that our speech is some sort of right with us. But anyway, and what I was saying is such a slippery slope. And another thing that I just tweet about a lot is that free speech is a process right, not a content right. In other words, the right is that speech is free, not what speech is free.
I think that one thing you have to remember on free speech is free speech, and it doesn't matter who is speaking or the point of view that they're espousing. It's still free speech. I get so frustrated when people tell me that hate speech is not protected speech. It most certainly is. It's just you have to, if you're going to have a free society, I believe you need free speech. And if you're going to have free speech, it's got to be free there are no free speech absolutists. You can claim to be one, but you're not. The best you can be, and I encourage everybody to be, is a free speech maximalist. I mean, let's face facts. If you were an absolutist, then though making child porn could be illegal, distributing it and viewing it and having parties with it would be free speech. If you were an absolutist, you could defame people. I mean, so yes, there are limits on free speech. Nobody can argue against that, but they have to be really, really, really broad limits. And I think, and I've been very critical of the Supreme Court a lot of times, but I think in this instance, they got it right. And if you want to read it, it's very dry and boring, but it's Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969. And they came up with the Brandenburg test, which effectively, though it didn't explicitly, but effectively overturned Schneck, where, the famous, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater quote came from. Under the Brandenburg test, all speech is protected unless it is speech meant to incite imminent lawless acts, and it's likely to result in the imminent lawless act taking place. And when I say lawless act, that law that it's going to be in violation of has to be a constitutional law. It can't be an unconstitutional infringement on speech. That's why you had, the Skokie trial where the Nazis were allowed to march through Skokie, Illinois, even though it had a large population of Holocaust survivors. So yeah, there are limits to it. They have to be exceptionally broad limits. And I think that we've reached, or we're doing a pretty good job in setting the parameters really broadly, where Europe is now in the process of rapidly contracting. Without free speech, you're not going to have any of your other civil liberties. And when you think about what civil liberties you have, there's not all that many of them. But the ones that are there are so expansive that without them, you can't have a free society. Like I said, without free speech, you can't have freedom of the press. Without free speech, you can't have freedom of religion. Without free speech, you can't have freedom of assemble, the right to redress. You certainly can't have the right to bear arms, because they just shut that speech down arguing for it. All the rights that you normally think of as civil liberties all flow from free speech. I hope I'm not boring people.
No, I was just going to say, Sean can't get back in. He's tried 4 times. He can't get back in. Is there, Jack, do you have anything to say?
I just wanted to say one more thing, and then maybe Saul had something to say, is when Taz was talking, I was looking up on the internet a saying that I half remembered, and it was this: when America sneezes, the world gets a cold. But what I'm saying is, when Europe sneezes, America could get a cold. We need to pay attention to what's going on in Europe with regard to speech and other civil liberties.
I'm going to disagree with you, Nancy.
Oh,
I
you
think
think
we
so?
all were the West. Yeah, I think we all were the West. I think if Europe keeps going the way they are, they're becoming the new Soviet Union. I don't see any difference between, well, I do see differences, but the way Europe is going right now, I do not see it ending any differently than where the Soviet Europe was prior to the wall falling. They're suppressing speech. They're introducing blasphemy. I can't even say that word. How do you say
Blasphemy.
that word, Nancy?
Blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
Hmm.
Blasphemy. Whatever.
You're fine.
They're introducing anti-religion laws in disguise, but only for certain religions. It's fine to make dung Madonna out of cow dung, but you can't do a cartoon about Muhammad. It's fine to do a piss Christ, but you can't call Muhammad a pedophile. I see Europe heading very much down that road into where they're going back to just an authoritarian dictatorship, which is, they're going to slap some lipstick on it and call it a democracy, but it's not. I think we as a country have to make a decision. Do we really want to spend our money and our lives defending somebody who don't share fundamental values?
No, nope.
I think that it's an important thing for America, just like we came